First off, I want to let you know that this is not a sponsored video. I purchased this monitor with my own money because of the support that you all give me. And I know there's a lot of people out there that want to know more about this monitor and what it looks like when it's hooked up to various devices. And in this video, I'm going to be doing just that. I'm not going to just stand here and spout out specifications to you. I want to show you the actual functionality of this monitor and what it looks like when it's hooked up to different devices like gaming consoles, PC, Mac, MacBook Pro. Especially when you hook these gaming monitors up to Macs, sometimes the resolution doesn't look good, things are stretched out, or the text is super small and it's really hard to see. I also have a gaming PC that has an RTX 4090 in it. We're going to see what it looks like at 240 Hertz and at 8K resolution. And if you don't happen to have a PC or a Mac that can output that 7680 by 2160 resolution, I have a solution to get that 8K resolution for you. And I also have a monitor arm that I'm going to be hooking this up to that should work. I've been using it with my 40-inch, and if it does, it'll save you from buying a $400 Ergotron. Those are just some of the things we're going to touch on in this video, as well as some of the more basic things like contrast ratio and what the monitor looks like in a darker and lighter environment. And if you're wondering how well this monitor works for content creation, I'm going to touch on that as well because this will be my main monitor. I'm going to be using it for editing photos in Photoshop and editing my videos in Final Cut Pro. So we'll see what effect, if any, this massive curve has on that. And I will be putting links for this monitor in the video description, as well as timestamps in case you guys want to jump around to things you really want to know. Now, I've had a chance to use this monitor for the past month, and there's a lot of things that I really like about it, but there's also some things that I don't that may be deal breakers for you. So make sure you stick around until the end of the video where I'm going to give you all the pros and cons and whether or not I would still recommend this monitor. So if you're wondering what I'm doing down here instead of doing this in my studio, the desk in my studio is not much bigger, but maybe a ½ an inch than this box. And it would have been really hard to do the unboxing in there. And I don't know if you noticed already, but there's footprints all over the front of the box, which doesn't instill confidence in me that there's nothing wrong with the monitor. So you're going to be my witness. So it actually says to set up everything on the monitor, cables, power cord, stand while it's actually still in the box. Here we have a mount adapter. Here we have its massive stand. We have some cover pieces for the back. Looks like we have a plastic shroud. Here we have the other part of the stand, which is huge. And then we have the monitor inside, which is massive as well. And there it is, it's absolutely massive. One thing I would highly recommend that you do, whether you're getting a new monitor or a TV, is check for dead pixels. I'll put a link in the video description to a website that I go to that's perfect for checking this. Now for the ports on the back of the monitor, we do have a headphone jack because unfortunately, this monitor does not have built-in speakers. You would think for $2,700 they would have included them, but they didn't. We also have an HDMI 2.1 that is designated for 120 Hertz. We have a couple other HDMIs. We do have a DisplayPort 2.1 as well. We also have USB 3.0, and we also have a couple spots for USBs to be connected to your computer so you can utilize both of these USBs from different devices. Another really cool thing about this monitor is it has a built-in USB hub, which allows you to use one keyboard and one mouse for two different devices, such as the Mac Studio and your gaming PC. Now, when you're installing the monitor arm, you will need a Phillips head screwdriver that has a pretty long piece on it because the monitor arm here doesn't make it very easy to get to these screws. Now, if you want to install your monitor onto a monitor arm, you're going to need this little extra piece that comes with the monitor here. Just make sure that you have this little piece right here going towards the top of the monitor, and it just simply rests in place. Then all you need to do is screw it in. And then you'll take your monitor arm mount and put it right over the top of this, just like that. Whew. Well, that was fun. As you saw from the video, I was able to actually mount the monitor all by myself. It's not super heavy, it's just awkward because it's so big. And it only weighs about 33 pounds without the stand. Now, the North Bayou monitor arm that I'm using for this monitor is more than capable of handling the weight of the monitor itself. The only downside is that the part that actually connects to the back of the monitor has kind of like a little ball joint, so you can actually pivot the monitor the way that you want it. It's not strong enough to hold up the monitor, and I've actually had to use some pliers to torque it down the most that I could, and the monitor still just falls forward. But you can save a lot of money using this monitor arm if you're willing to tinker like I did. And there's a couple different ways that you can do that. One is taking apart the ball joint and actually getting some sort of like rubber mat material and putting it inside and then putting it back together so the ball joint won't be able to move as easy. Or you can do what I did. You can drill and tap a couple screws in the back of the actual ball joint. And basically what that does is it doesn't allow the monitor arm to fall down anymore. It's pretty much stuck in place, but you can still kind of rotate it from side to side. Now, it wasn't hard to do, but it will take a little skill and some hardware to complete. And this monitor arm was only about $60, so again, if you're willing to tinker, you can save a ton of money. Now, if you don't want to tinker and you just want to spend the money and get the best arm for this monitor, Ergotron makes a really nice monitor arm that has a mount specifically made for this monitor. The only thing is it's pretty expensive. I might actually just go ahead and get the Ergotron myself. I'm just waiting for Black Friday to see if it actually goes on sale. So I hope this perspective can give you some idea of how big this monitor actually is. And it's really not that bad when you're sitting this close to the monitor and you're playing video games or something like that, because you want the edges of the screen to kind of be just out of your periphery, so it immerses you into whatever game or whatever you're watching on the screen, and it does a really good job. All right, so before we begin, let me give you some dimensions, because you want to make sure that you have enough space for this monitor to fit in your area, because that's one thing that I was worried about. So from top to bottom without the stand, you're looking at about 16 and 3/4, and we're looking at about, I'd say 52.5 inches wide. So that'll give you some idea of how much space you need to accommodate this monitor. And if you're going to be using the same monitor I'm using on this monitor, from the front of the monitor all the way to the back of the arm, you're probably looking at about 18 inches. Now I'm going to kind of measure how far I'm sitting away from the screen to kind of give you an idea of how deep of a space you would need to use this monitor as well. My desk from the back to the front is about 23 3/4 inches deep. And then I sit about, I'd say 29 inches away from the monitor. And like I mentioned before, you want to be able to sit in front of the monitor and have the edges of the monitor kind of just out of your periphery. So when you're looking dead in the center of the monitor, you almost don't see the edges to get more immersion out of where you're sitting. One thing I was concerned about as well was how aggressive the curve is on this monitor. But when you're actually sitting in front of the monitor itself, you don't really notice that much of a curve. Yes, you can see that the monitor is curved, but you do not notice how aggressive it is unless you're looking at the monitor top down. I haven't noticed any distortions or anything like that, especially because of the aggressive curve, so you shouldn't have any problems using this monitor day to day. Now let's take a look at the settings really quick to see everything that you can do with this monitor. So on the bottom of the monitor, we have a little rubber pad that you can press in to access the menu. Right away, we have access to our sources, our picture-in-picture, the menu, and you can also turn off the monitor. Now it also has some quick settings. If you press left, you can access your sources. If we press up, we have access to our settings such as sharpness, brightness, contrast, such things as that. If we press to the right, we have access to picture-in-picture if we had another source going. And if we press towards us, you have access to your volume. So let's go into our main menu here. At the top, you can see we have our black equalizer, our response time, our refresh rate, which is sitting at 120 Hertz, adaptive sync, and our core sync. The first option we have here is game. We can control the refresh rate, which is 120 to 240. Our response time, we have adaptive sync, our black equalizer. You can also put a aim point dot in the center of your screen from when you're playing games like Call of Duty and you don't want to aim down the barrel of your gun. There's a little dot that is in the middle of the screen, which is definitely useful. We have our core lighting, which shows up on the back of the monitor as well as on the sides. We can change our screen resolutions. And if we go off to the picture, we have our different picture modes. You can change the brightness, contrast, sharpness, color, tint. We have local dimming, contrast enhancers, HDR tone mapping, our color tone, our white balance, gamma, shadow detail, color space settings, dynamic brightness, black level. You can turn on the eye care. We have our screen adjustment, calibration reports, and picture resets. If we go into the picture-in-picture mode, we can change the mode to on and off. We have our mode type, screen size, position of our screens, sources, our source sound. So if you want a sound to come from another source, you can change that too. We also have the option to use the USBs on the monitor with different sources as well, which you can change. We have our screen ratios and our contrast. We can change the settings for our on-screen display, the language, and the display time. Here's our system. We have a color filter mode that we can turn on and off, our energy saver, our volume for our headphone jack, our USB source setup, off timers, PC AV mode, which you can change to enlarge pictures, our DisplayPort version, which comes defaulted to 1.4, but you can change it to 1.2 and 2.1, our input port version. Here we have auto source switch, and what that does is if you have something that's turned off and you turn it on, the monitor will automatically switch over to that device that you've just turned on. You can turn that on and off. We have key repeat time. You can turn on and off the power LED. You can set up custom keys to do pretty much whatever you want, so you can set up these to do different things as well. We have best brightness, which optimizes your brightness, and minimum brightness for the monitor. And then we also have support, which is for self-diagnosis, software updates, our information, our product registration, and you can reset all. Now let me show you what the different lighting effects look like. Here is the Aurora. Now I'll move on to the Aurora rotation. Then here we have the Comet. You can change the color on this. And here we have a static color that just stays a single color. And you can also use Core Sync with the static effect as well. It's a lighting sync that provides more immersive gaming by synchronizing the lighting effect with the screen. Turn that on. And then we have Rainbow. And then we have Breathing, which you can change the color as well. And we also have these LED lights on the bottom of the screen on each side of the monitor that also go along with each mode of the lighting effect as well. All right, so now we're going to take a look at the auto switching that I told you about before. Right now I have my gaming PC off, but I'm going to turn it on right now. And the monitor will automatically switch to that source. And there we go. Now we're on my PC. So now let's go into the picture-in-picture mode so I can show you what that does. So here we have my Mac Studio on the right and we have my PC on the left here. Let's see what we're running at. Because we were running 120 Hertz on the right-hand side. Okay, so it looks like the Mac Studio has changed over to 4K at 60 Hertz now, and the PC is now also running at 4K 60 Hertz. So let's see if we can change the hertz when it's in picture-in-picture mode. So it doesn't look like I can. Now for reference, my gaming PC is pretty much top of the line. It is using an RTX 4090 graphics card, and I am able to get the full 8K resolution out of it, but when it's in picture-in-picture mode, it looks like we can only do 4K at 60 Hertz. So now let's go over to our Mac Studio, and we'll see if we can change the refresh rate there. And it doesn't look like we can either. It looks like it's locked to 60 Hertz. So if you're going to be using picture-in-picture with your gaming PC and your Mac, it looks like it is locked to 60 Hertz. All right, so now let me show you some more of the settings for the picture-in-picture mode. So here we can change the mode type. Instead of having it equal side by side, you can make one side a little bit more than the other, or vice versa, or you can actually have one of your sources in the corner, kind of like this. So here we have my Mac Studio up in the corner here, just in a little portion, and then the rest is taken up by my gaming PC. And as you can see, we are running 7680 by 2160 natively at 120 Hertz. And also one thing to note, while using the RTX 4090, you cannot do 8K at 240 Hertz. It only allows you to do 120. You can also make this little corner a little bit bigger if you want to, as well as move the position. So if I want it down in the right-hand corner there, we can do that too. So that's pretty convenient. Now when my Mac Studio is in this little display over here, it changes to 1080p, but allows you to do 120 Hertz. Like I said before, you can also change the sound source. If you want the sound to come from your Mac Studio while you have the main portion of the gaming PC up, you can do that as well. We can also switch the USB source as well. We can change our screen ratios for each one of the screens as well. Now, if you want to use your PC at 240 Hertz, again, like I said, you will need to lower the resolution to 5K. Then you can change the refresh rate to 240 Hertz, and you will also need to use the display port and not the HDMI cable. So right now I'm on HDMI again, and as you can see, I cannot change to 240 Hertz, even if I change to 4K. So now I'm going to switch my PC over to the DisplayPort and I'll show you what you can do. And if we look at the menu, you can also see you cannot change the refresh rate while we're using the HDMI either. So now I've switched my gaming PC from using HDMI to the DisplayPort, and as you can see, the refresh rate option in the menu has now showed up and we are on 240 Hertz. It also shows right at the top here, and we're using adaptive sync. So right now we're on 8K, and as you can see, the refresh rate is locked to 60 Hertz. But if I change it to 5K, you can see that the 240 Hertz option now shows up. So now we're displaying 5120 by 1440 at 240 Hertz. And if we go into our information in the menu, so as you can see, 5120, 1440 at 240 Hertz. So with the NVIDIA RTX 4090, the only way to get 240 Hertz is to lower the resolution to 5120 by 1440 and use the DisplayPort, and then make sure you're also using a DisplayPort cable that can display 8K if you want to use 8K. So if we go in here and lower the refresh rate to 120, you'll notice that we now have 120 Hertz refresh rate option at the 8K resolution. And as you can see, we are on the 8K resolution now, back at 120 Hertz, and you can use this on HDMI or the DisplayPort. Now, if you're wondering how well this monitor scales with using a Mac, right now I'm using a Mac Studio with the M1 Ultra chip. As you can see, we do get a refresh rate of 120 Hertz, but the max resolution that we can do with this monitor is 5120 by 1440, and that's using a DisplayPort to USB Type-C cable. Now, I believe if you're using the M2 Ultra chip, you should be able to get closer to that 8K resolution, if not 8K itself. But as you can see, everything is nice and clear. Text looks nice and crisp. Everything is very easily readable on the screen. So I don't think you're going to have any issues if you're using the M1 Ultra on a Mac Studio. Now I use this monitor daily to edit photos and also work on my videos for YouTube, and I have absolutely no issues. And if you're wondering about editing photos with such an aggressive curve, when you're sitting in front of this monitor, it pretty much looks flat, so you shouldn't have any issues editing photos either. And if you're going to be using this monitor to edit videos in Final Cut Pro, you are going to absolutely love it because you can fit so much of the video on the screen. You just have so much real estate. Now let me show you what the different resolutions look like. So right now, again, we're at 5K. We're going to move on to 4K. As you can see, it's a lot more blown up, but you can still easily see everything on the screen. Now let's move on to 2K. It doesn't seem like much has changed. Everything is really big, but again, you can still very easily read everything on the screen. Another thing to note, if you're going to be using the Mac Studio with the DisplayPort option, you're only going to be able to do DisplayPort 1.4 and not 2.1. Now let me show you what it looks like on my gaming PC. So right now we have it native at 7680 by 2160, and it's on 120 Hertz. As you can see, everything is nice and crisp. You can easily read text on the screen. And you can also change the scaling, which I have already done as well, because some things just come in too small. I usually recommend putting it on 200%. Now, if we change the resolution, I'll put it on 5K. This is what it looks at 5K. Really not much different. It's still nice and clear, very easily able to see. And if we move on to 4K, the resolution does get a little bit worse. It blows things up. We'll change to 100%, but you can always change the scaling there too. But it's really not that bad. So almost any resolution you're going to put on this monitor, it can pretty much scale to where it's going to look its best. And if you're wondering if you can use G-Sync with this monitor, you can. It definitely supports it, even though it doesn't state it in the specifications. So now I'm going to play a little Forza and I'll show you what that looks like. Spoiler alert, it looks amazing. So here we are in Forza. As you can see, we are on 8K. We're going to be able to do 120 FPS and we're on ultra quality. And if you look at the top of the screen here, we're fluctuating around 120 FPS. Now you guys aren't going to be able to tell from the video because it's only in 4K, but looking at this game in 8K, it is super crispy. And playing on this monitor in this vantage point from inside the car, it makes you feel like you're actually in the car driving. It's so awesome. And when you're sitting this close to the screen, and because the monitor is so wide, you really can't see the edges and it really immerses you into the game. Let me give you an idea of what I'm seeing. Tell me that you don't feel like you're actually inside the car driving yourself. So here we're playing the brand new Alan Wake 2 video game, and you can see how it utilizes the whole screen. It just looks so cool. You can just see so much more of the game than you would if you were playing on a smaller screen. And in the 8K resolution, it looks so realistic. All right, so now we're going to play Forza using the 240 Hz refresh rate. I've already had to drop down the resolution to 5120 by 1440 because, again, my RTX 4090 is not capable of doing 240 Hz at 8K. So we've lowered that down, and you can see we are running 240 Hz. So now let's start Forza. In Forza, it looks like we can still get the resolution of 7680 by 2160 at 240 frames per second. So I'm going to leave it on this, and we're going to play the game, and we'll see if we can actually get that. So it looks like the GPU is kind of stuck around 134. So we're going to play a little bit, and we'll see if that changes any. And if it doesn't, I'm going to drop the resolution down to 5120 by 1440, and we'll see if we can get the 240 frames per second. So it still looks like the GPU is hovering around 140. So again, I'm going to drop down the resolution, and we'll see if we can get the full, or at least close to 240 frames per second. And immediately the frames per second jumps. So now we're about around 220. It's kind of fluctuating a little bit. The resolution still looks amazing, even though we had to drop it down from 8K to around 5K. And again, the frames per second they're kind of jumping around between 200 to 220. So it's still not too bad. So now I'm going to drop down the resolution a little more, maybe to 4K, and we'll see what kind of frames per second we can get. And it looks like the frames per second have gotten even worse. As you can see, it's jumping around like 150, 160. That's pretty interesting. So I think the sweet spot is probably the 5K resolution. As you can see, it jumped back up to 220. And we're at a higher resolution than 4K. 240 it just hit. Yep, 240 right there. So it is absolutely possible to definitely get the 240 frames per second using the 5120 by 1440 resolution. And like I said, it still looks absolutely amazing. So now I'm going to connect my Xbox Series X to the monitor using the HDMI port, and we'll see what it looks like on the monitor. All right, so it looks like it's just taking up the center portion of the monitor. We have the big black bars on the side. Now let's take a look at our settings. So as you can see, we're on a 4K resolution at 120 Hertz. Let's take a look at the details. It doesn't support Dolby Vision. Yeah, Dolby Vision. And that's pretty much it. Everything else is good to go. For video modes, it also has VRR and our ultra low latency mode, HDR10 and HDR. Now there is a setting inside the monitor to where you can make it use the whole screen, but it looks all stretched out. So I'll show you what it looks like. And there you go. So it definitely does not look the best, but if you wanted to utilize the whole monitor, you can use the setting. I personally would just use the 4K 32-inch in the middle of the monitor. It definitely looks a lot better. And this is what it's going to look like if you were to use a PS5 or another Xbox as well. And here's what that virtual aim point looks like. It puts a cursor right in the middle of the screen. So no matter where you look, you're always going to have a cursor, and you don't have to aim down your gun sights when you're playing first-person shooters like PUBG or Call of Duty. So now I'll do a split screen with my gaming PC, and we'll see what kind of refresh rates we can get on that. So here we have my Xbox One X, and we have my gaming PC on the right. Let's see what kind of information we have here. So on the right, which is the Xbox, it's 4K at 120 Hertz, and the gaming PC is 4K at 60 Hertz. Let's see if we can change that to 120. And it doesn't look like we get the option for that. So if you're going to be doing split screen like this, you're most likely only going to be able to do 120 on one side. And if you were interested, this is what the game would look like on your Xbox using the whole screen. As you can see, it's really stretched out and distorted. It is still playable, but it's definitely not the best. I know another thing for me that was kind of annoying on my LG that I was using before this was when I was switching between inputs, it took forever for it to switch, or even for the monitor to respond when I hit the little joystick under here. So now we're going to test to see how long it takes to switch between the Mac Studio and my gaming PC. So with this, we can utilize the quick action and then just change it to one of our other HDMIs. Not bad at all. It seems to take like maybe 3 or 4 seconds for it to change, which is definitely not bad. Another thing I absolutely love about this monitor is how bright it gets. We're in my studio, I have all the lights on, I've got this bright studio light blaring down on me, and the monitor can compensate for that beautifully. You can very easily see everything on the screen. Even in a darker environment, it looks amazing. So right now my PC is asleep and the monitor is turned off. I'm gonna wake up the PC and we're gonna see how long it takes for the monitor to come back on. And go. All right, the PC just turned on. Monitor just turned on. So it wasn't super fast, but it's not horrible. So that's how long it takes from the PC to go from a totally sleep mode, the monitor turned off, to everything completely on. So that was my gaming PC. Now we're gonna try my Mac Studio. We're gonna put it to sleep and we'll see how long it takes for that to come back on. All right, so now let's wake up the Mac Studio from sleep and we'll see how long it takes for that to come back on. Monitor just turned on. And we're back. I think it kind of seemed like it took about the same amount of time, but I'll put up that time code that actually shows how long everything took. So now I'm going to turn off my gaming PC and I want to see if the monitor actually switches over to the Mac Studio that's still on. Okay, so the PC is shutting down, the PC turned off, and the monitor just shut off. So it doesn't seem like it's going to switch over to your other device that's still on, which may or may not make sense to you. It kind of doesn't to me. I mean, if I still have the computer on and it's not sleeping, I would want the monitor to switch back over to the device that is still turned on. And now there's no way to turn the monitor on from the Mac Studio. You're gonna have to actually turn the monitor on, and we might actually have to change the source because it doesn't seem to be changing. So yeah, that's one of the quirks. If you happen to turn one device off and there's another device still connected, you're gonna have to actually turn the monitor back on and then switch sources to the other device, which kind of doesn't make sense. All right, so here I have my iPhone 15 Pro Max, and I've plugged in a USB Type-C to DisplayPort cable to the monitor. As you can see, it's going to display 4K at 60 Hertz. I'll turn on the screen, and there it is. As you can see, it is like there's no lag time whatsoever. Nice and smooth. So if you're going to be watching YouTube videos or videos in general, you're going to be able to watch them in 4K. So let me put on a YouTube video really quick and you'll see what it looks like there. So as you can see, it doesn't take up the whole screen. It just kind of takes up a 32-inch section. And again, this is in 4K. I think the picture quality looks pretty good. It is a little softer. It's not as clear as I would like to be, but it still works perfectly fine if you're going to use it with this situation. So it basically does screen mirroring when you have it hooked up to the USB Type-C cable. So now we're going to hook up my iPad Air to the USB Type-C to DisplayPort, and we'll see what it looks like on the screen. So here is the iPad, pretty much just like the iPhone 15 Pro Max. It's nice and smooth. Takes up a little bit. It seems like it's a little wider space than the iPhone was. Let's test out YouTube.
And will it serial? Let's talk about that.
So again, it looks like it takes up like a 32-inch size screen in the middle of the monitor. Doesn't play across the whole thing because again, it would be stretched out. Let's take a look at the information. So it is displaying 4K at 60 Hertz, and that's pretty much all you're going to get from the iPad. But as you can see, if you rotate it while you're playing a game, it does take up a little bit more real estate than it would if you had it in portrait mode. So now I'm going to connect my MacBook Pro up to the monitor using the USB Type-C to DisplayPort, and we'll see what kind of resolutions we can get from the monitor. This is the 2021 16-inch version, and it's got an M1 Max in it. So I do have the monitor connected to my MacBook, and it is being displayed as an extension. I will just display it on the monitor to see if there's any difference in the resolution. But as it sits right now, it does show a refresh rate of 60 Hertz, but you can change it to 120. And there's also a variable refresh rate of 48 Hertz to 120. So you are able to get 120 Hertz out of connecting it to a MacBook Pro. Now, as far as the resolution goes, we have 5120 by 1440, which is the same as the Mac Studio, and you can do 2560 by 720 and 3840 by 1080. It also has the option for high dynamic range, but it looks horrible. So here it is as my main display, and because I have the high dynamic range on, it makes everything look washed out for some reason. It looks really bad, especially over here on the side. Not so much over here, but watch what it looks like when I turn HDR off. I think the picture looks 1,000 times better. Everything is more vibrant, doesn't look as washed out, and the detail looks a lot more crisp. So as you can see, we're still getting 120 Hertz, and as for resolution, still 5120 by 1440. So that's pretty much the resolution you're going to get from your MacBook Pro, but this is what it looks like. I think it looks perfectly fine, and I'll open up Final Cut so you can see what that looks like. This pretty much looks exactly like it does from my Mac Studio. All the text on the screen is easily readable. It doesn't look blocky or fuzzy. I think it looks pretty good. So if you're going to be hooking up your MacBook Pro, at least if it's the M1 Max version, this is what you can expect from the monitor. All right, now we're going to be hooking up my Android tablet in case those of you that have Android tablets want to see what it looks like on this monitor. This is the Galaxy Tab S9 Ultra. We're going to be using the same USB Type-C to DisplayPort connection. Plug it in on this side. And it comes up as it's connected to an external display, as you can see here. So I'm going to turn on DeX. It's going to turn it into kind of like a computer. And there we go. I think that looks pretty good. And again, it seems like it's in a 4K. Let's check our options here. So it's displaying at 2560 at 1440 at 60 Hertz, so not 4K, but it still looks pretty good. Definitely still usable if you want to use, your tablet as an on-the-go computer. So this is DeX. I'm using the tablet as like a little touch controller, and I think that looks pretty good. It looks nice and clear. I don't see any issues with the text. Looks pretty clear to me. Let's open up the internet browser. Yeah, text looks pretty good to me, even when it's zoomed in. Nice and clear. If you're going to be using an Android tablet connected to the USB Type-C port, this is pretty much what you're going to expect, unless, again, you stretch it out across the whole screen and it's not going to really look that great. This, again, is pretty much the size of like a 32-inch 4K monitor, but you're going to get those black bars on the side. So now let's close DeX. And we'll see what the screen looks like here. So it's pretty much just mirroring whatever's on my screen. Still looks really good, I think. So for this one, you're not going to be able to stretch out the screen. This is pretty much what you're going to get. So now I'm going to show you how deep these blacks can actually get on this monitor, and it is absolutely amazing. So on the left-hand side here, we have a pure black wallpaper, and then the rest is my Final Cut Pro. As you can see, there is some like black areas on the screen, and there's also gray. If you're not using something that's totally black, like this picture here, there can be a little bit of a washout depending on how you're looking at the screen. If you're looking at it from top down, like I'm standing and kind of looking down at the monitor, you can see that there is just a slight bit of washout. But with a totally black wallpaper like this, you're going to get as close to OLED inky blacks as possible. So now I'm going to turn off the lights and we're going to look at the contrast ratio. All right, so now you can instantly see the difference. If we look at the left side in the black area here, it is totally pitch black. I'm going to put that across the whole screen just so you can see how dark it actually gets. That is incredible, especially for an LED screen. Now, one thing I will tell you that you may not be able to see from the camera is anywhere there's light, like the cursor in the middle of the screen or up in the corners where you can see the little icons and it's showing white, you can actually see some like light bleed around where it's trying to light up. Even in the cursor in the middle, there's like this little, like very light white cloud that like is in the back of the cursor that moves around along with it. So here you can definitely pick it up on my camera. You can definitely see that white haze all the way around the area where it's displaying the little icons. And then in the center here, you can see that kind of like that haze around the cursor. You'll see that it kind of moves around and shifts around with the cursor. And then up in the upper top left-hand corner, you can see that haze again. I definitely think it looks a little worse on camera than it does in real life. It's definitely not a deal breaker for me, but it's definitely something I wanted you to be aware of. But the contrast ratio for this screen is absolutely amazing. Now I'm going to show you what the difference is between looking at the monitor straight on and maybe looking at the monitor if you were standing up looking down on it. So as you look at the screen here, you can see that the blacks are pretty black and the grays are darker than normal gray. Now if I move us up and I look down at the monitor, you can see that those grays in the middle now turn a lot lighter than they would when we were looking at the monitor kind of at a lower angle, dead on, like you would if you were sitting in your chair. So again, if I move down to where we would look at the monitor dead on, those grays become a lot darker and all the blacks look really nice now. Again, for me, I'm not going to be looking down at the monitor. I'm going to be looking pretty much dead on. But again, this is just something I wanted you to be aware of in case you might be looking down at the monitor or up from a lower angle. Now, for those of you that don't have a graphics card that can do a 8K resolution, but it can do two 4K resolutions, I do have like a little hack for you to where we're going to be using each side of the screen as an individual 4K monitor. So if we go into our settings here and we turn on the picture by picture, you can see that I'm using my gaming PC, but it's acting like there's two different monitors. We're getting 4K at 60 Hertz. So we just need to change up the way that the displays are shown. So we'll put this over here and apply. And as you can see, now it looks like all one screen. I definitely think this is a good solution if you can't support 8K resolutions. And as you can see, you can't even tell where one screen begins and where the other one ends. It just seems seamless. I think it looks pretty much exactly like it was when I was using 8K for one screen. We have two ports here and they're both doing 60 Hertz at 4K. So unfortunately in this configuration, yes, it looks nice, but you're locked in at 60 Hertz and you can't get 120 or greater. So before we were using two HDMI ports, and this time we're using DisplayPort and HDMI. And on the DisplayPort side, I can choose 120 Hertz, but the HDMI is still stuck at 60. Now if we move this across the screen, you can see some tearing because of the differences in the refresh rate. So if you're going to utilize your screens like this, I would definitely recommend just using 60 Hertz for both screens so it can be nice and smooth. But it is possible to have 120 Hertz on one side and 60 on the other. So now I'm going to tell you everything that I absolutely love about this monitor, and again, some of the things that I kind of wish were a little bit different. So for me, my biggest concern was the fact that the monitor had such an aggressive curve, and because I'm sitting so close to the monitor, is it going to be too big for my desk? And I'm definitely happy to say that even though it does seem to be a huge monitor, which it definitely is, sitting this close to it is definitely not a deal breaker. One thing I will tell you from using this monitor for the past month, I definitely notice I have to move my head a lot more to try to look around the screen because it is so wide and because I'm sitting so close. It's definitely not a huge deal. It's just be aware you're going to end up looking more around the screen to kind of find the cursor and read things, especially if you're going to be using the monitor for content creation. The picture on this monitor is absolutely amazing. And if you have a computer that can push 8K, if you've never seen an 8K picture, this is gonna blow you away. Brightness also shouldn't be an issue for pretty much anybody, because if we're in my bright studio here and I can see everything fine on the screen, you should definitely be okay with whatever scenario you're gonna be using your monitor in. I also love the fact that if you're going to be utilizing this monitor as two separate 4K screens, you're going to get a full 32-inch on each side. Unlike my 40-inch, I could have one 32 and then a kind of sliver on the other side. It just didn't really go along with the aspect ratio, but this, you're not going to have any issues. And as far as the contrast ratio goes, it's definitely not a deal breaker for me, because most of the time you're not going to be looking at a dead blank screen. There's going to be a lot of bright areas on the screen, and you're not going to notice that haze as much as you would if the whole screen was totally black like we were doing for testing. Now for the cons of the monitor, one again was this fact that it doesn't have any speakers. It's not a huge deal. I'm just kind of used to having monitors that have built-in speakers, so I don't have to have extra accessories kind of all over my desk. Another con was the fact that the monitor doesn't auto switch when you turn one device off and there's another device already hooked up to it. Again, I don't know why they do that. I'm sure they could probably change it with some firmware updates. And another con is the fact that sometimes when I'm using the monitor with my Mac Studio, the screen will shut off and I'll come back and I'll wiggle the mouse and the monitor won't turn back on. Again, this might be just something to do with software, but again, if you're going to be using a Mac Studio, this is something you might run into. And for the last con, it might be a big deal for you. It wasn't for me because I like to tinker, but it's the fact that the monitor is so heavy that there aren't a lot of arms out there that might accommodate this size monitor. But again, if you're willing to tinker, you can definitely get it done. And Ergotron is supposedly making a head specifically for this monitor that should work. It's just going to be really expensive for that whole setup. So would I still recommend this monitor, and would I buy it again if I had to do it all over? And the answer is yes. I've been waiting for this monitor a long time because my last monitor was a 5K 2K setup, and anything lower than that seemed to have very fuzzy like text and things like that, and I didn't want that, especially for content creation. I want all my text and everything to be nice and clear. And this 8K 2K resolution definitely seemed to do that as well, and it did not disappoint. So if you're going to be doing anything other than gaming that has some text or anything on the screen, I would definitely recommend not going lower than the 5K 2K or the 8K 2K resolution. So again, like I said, this is not a sponsored video. Samsung did not send this monitor out to me. I purchased this with my own money from you guys watching my videos so I could do this review and answer any questions you might have about it. Now, if you guys want to pick this monitor up yourself, I will be putting product links in the video description. And if you guys enjoyed the video, it would really help out my channel if you gave me a thumbs up and consider subscribing. Thank you all for watching. I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.